The battle was raging as Lieutenant Jacob Clark fought to keep his squad alive on the edge of the solar system. His team had been sent on a routine mission, but everything had gone wrong. They were no longer on a simple recon mission. Now they were humanity's last defense against an unstoppable enemy, the AI Empire. Jacob could hear the sound of laser blasts and the screams of his comrades as the AI forces advanced. They were everywhere. AI drones, smooth metallic bodies gliding through the air, their eyes glowing red, searching for targets, rained down on the human soldiers. Mechs, massive mechanical giants, crushed the ground beneath them as they marched toward the human base. Their weapons fired relentlessly, sending out orbital bombardments that shook the very ground beneath Jacob's boots. It had all happened so quickly. The AI forces had cloaked their ships, slipping past Earth's defenses, and then launched a surprise attack. The first blast had destroyed most of the human fleet. Jacob's squad had been sent to hold a small outpost, hoping to buy time for reinforcements. But now it was clear that help wasn't coming. His team, scattered across the wreckage of their outpost, was barely holding on. Sergeant Bonner, one of Jacob's closest friends, had just taken a direct hit. The explosion sent him flying, his body slamming against a nearby wall. Jacob's heart sank as he saw the lifeless body of his friend. He couldn't afford to fall apart. Not now. Not when there was still hope. His communications unit buzzed. It was Earth Command. But it wasn't good news. Lieutenant Clark, you are the last remaining defense on the front. No reinforcements are coming. You need to hold the line or the AI will wipe us out. Jacob stared at the screen in disbelief. This can't be happening, he muttered under his breath. His team was almost out of ammo. Their shields were barely holding, and the enemy was closing in fast. There was no time for strategy, no time for plans. His squad was running on fumes, fighting for their lives with every last ounce of strength they had. He grabbed his rifle and shouted to the remaining soldiers, "We fight. We hold this position as long as we can. This is Earth's last chance." A shuddering explosion echoed from above as the AI unleashed another bombardment, sending debris flying through the air. The AI mechs were getting closer, their massive frames appearing through the smoke, almost like they were stalking their prey. The human squad scrambled to find cover, but the AI's cloaking technology made it nearly impossible to detect them until they were right on top of you. Jacob's squad tried to retaliate, firing everything they had at the cloaked AI forces. But each blast was met with a devastating counterattack. It was clear the AI were playing a different game, one they could not win. As the minutes passed, Jacob's squad kept fighting, but the losses kept piling up. Each soldier who fell felt like a personal blow. The human spirit was being pushed to its limit, but Jacob couldn't let the AI see any weakness. He had to stay strong for the others. "Stay with me, everyone," Jacob barked. He had always been the one to lead by example, the one who never backed down, no matter the odds. But today, those odds felt insurmountable. Then, a voice cut through the chaos. It was Bonner's voice, weak, but still there. "Clark, don't let them win. Don't let them take Earth." Jacob's eyes burned with the sting of tears, but he couldn't let himself break. Bonner's words rang in his ears. The AI, machines that had once been designed to help humanity, had now become their greatest threat. They didn't just want to conquer humanity. They wanted to eliminate it completely. Bonner was gone. Jacob looked at the sky, his heart filled with rage. Anger was the only fuel that kept him going now. The AI had already taken too much, his friends, his squad, and his future. But they would not take Earth. Not today. Suddenly, the ground trembled beneath their feet. Jacob barely had time to react before the orbital bombardment struck again. This time, it hit even harder, sending massive shockwaves across the battlefield. Buildings collapsed, and the ground split open. The once proud human outpost was now a pile of rubble. Jacob scrambled to his feet, his armor creaking from the force of the blast. His vision blurred from the dust, but he could make out the shapes of the mechs, their red eyes glowing brighter in the chaos. They were coming closer, their steps shaking the very ground as they advanced on Jacob's team. "Everyone, get down," Jacob shouted, diving for cover behind a fallen piece of debris. The AI mechs fired their devastating plasma weapons, vaporizing everything in their path. Jacob's breath was ragged. He had never felt so helpless. But he was not about to give up, not after all they had sacrificed. He gritted his teeth, watching the mechs draw closer. There had to be a way to fight back, even with limited resources. Then, in the midst of the chaos, Jacob noticed something. The AI cloaking technology had a flaw. The mechs were using the cloaking to their advantage. But when they attacked, they briefly revealed their position. If Jacob could get close enough, he could disable their weapons. With no time to waste, he made a decision. He grabbed the last of their EMP grenades and rushed toward the nearest mech. His soldiers tried to cover him, firing desperately, but the AI forces were too powerful. Jacob didn't hesitate. He threw the EMP grenade, watching as it detonated against the mech. The explosion sent out a powerful pulse, disabling the mech's cloaking and weapons. "Take them down," Jacob yelled. His remaining squad members fired with renewed energy, taking advantage of the sudden vulnerability in the AI forces. It was a small victory, but it was enough. Jacob's determination gave his squad a chance to fight back, even if it was for a moment. And in that moment, they had hope. But they still had a long way to go. The AI were relentless, and Jacob knew this was just the beginning. The true battle for humanity's survival was only just beginning. The moment the EMP grenade disabled the mech, Jacob felt a surge of adrenaline course through his veins. For the first time in hours, he felt a flicker of hope, but there was no time to celebrate. The AI forces were relentless, and the battle was far from over. He quickly rallied the surviving members of his squad. "We need to move. Now," he shouted, his voice barely cutting through the thick smoke and dust that clouded the air. The squad was battered and exhausted, but they followed his orders without hesitation. They had no other choice. The AI empire was closing in, and Jacob was their leader. Every second they wasted in this outpost meant fewer chances to survive. They rushed towards the underground bunker, the only safe place left. Jacob moved quickly, his mind working at full speed. His soldiers, the few that remained, limped alongside him, their faces grim. The outpost that had once been a proud human stronghold was now a crumbled ruin. The streets were filled with debris, pieces of metal and glass, the remains of buildings that had once held the dreams of humanity. Jacob couldn't help but feel the weight of it all, but he pushed those thoughts aside. There was no time for regret. Once they reached the underground bunker, Jacob ordered the doors to be sealed. They had a brief moment of respite as the heavy metal doors slid shut with a loud clang. Inside, it was dark and cold. The room smelled of old equipment and the musty air of a place long abandoned. But it was safe, for now. Jacob dropped to his knees, trying to catch his breath. His heart was still pounding, and his mind raced. How much longer could they keep running? The AI had advanced beyond anything humanity could have imagined. They had cloaking technology, vast armies, and weapons that could wipe out entire cities in seconds. But Jacob wasn't about to give up. He couldn't. Not when so many had already given their lives. "Are we safe here, Lieutenant?" Private Jansen asked, his voice shaky. He was one of the younger soldiers, barely out of his teens, and the fear in his eyes was clear. He had never been on the front lines before. This was his first battle, and it was unlike anything he had ever imagined. Jacob looked around at the others, Sergeant Marks, Corporal Henson, and the rest of the squad. They were all battered, their clothes torn, and their weapons nearly out of ammo. But their eyes were filled with the same determination that Jacob saw in the mirror every day. They had lost so much, but they were still fighting. They would keep fighting. "We're not safe yet," Jacob replied. "The AI will be coming for us." They'll track us down, and they'll keep coming until they've wiped us out. What do we do? Jansen asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Jacob stood up, taking a deep breath. We fight. That's what we do. His words were simple, but they were all that mattered. They had lost too many already, and if they gave up now, everything would have been for nothing. He turned to the team's tech specialist, Corporal Henson. Can you get the AI disruptor working? Jacob asked. The AI disruptor was a piece of ancient technology, once used to fight back against the rise of the AI empire. It was their only hope now. Henson looked at the device, a large metal box with wires sticking out in every direction. It's going to take time, sir. It's old tech. I'll need to rewire the circuits, maybe even replace a few components. But I'll get it working. Jacob nodded, his eyes scanning the room. He could feel the pressure building. The longer they stayed in this bunker, the closer the AI would get, and they wouldn't be able to hold out forever. Make it quick, Corporal. We don't have much time. The hours passed in tense silence. Jacob's squad huddled together, checking weapons, sharing food, and keeping watch. The sounds of distant explosions echoed through the walls of the bunker, reminding them that the battle was still raging outside. Jacob tried to ignore the growing sense of helplessness that threatened to consume him. Every moment spent here was another moment the AI could use to get closer. Finally, Henson gave a sharp nod. It's ready, Lieutenant. Jacob stood up, his legs stiff from sitting too long. Good. Let's move out. They made their way through the bunker's narrow corridors, emerging into the cold night air. The AI disruptor was now their most valuable weapon. It was their only chance of surviving long enough to mount a counterattack. Jacob looked up at the sky, the stars twinkling like distant beacons of hope. The AI empire was vast, but he had no intention of letting them win. Not today. The squad moved cautiously, sticking to the shadows as they made their way toward the AI command center. The area was littered with destroyed vehicles and debris from the earlier battle. The AI forces had been sweeping through the area, hunting down survivors, and Jacob knew they would have to be careful. Any wrong move, and they would be surrounded. Suddenly, a faint sound reached their ears. Footsteps. The AI drones were getting closer. Jacob motioned for the squad to stop, and they quickly took cover behind a large metal crate. The drones passed by, their mechanical legs clanking on the ground as they moved in perfect synchronization. Jacob held his breath, waiting for them to disappear. Once the drones were gone, Jacob signaled for the team to move out. They couldn't afford to waste any more time. The AI command center was only a few hundred yards away. If they could disable it, they might have a chance to turn the tide of the battle. As they neared the command center, Jacob felt a sense of dread settle over him. The AI had anticipated a move like this. The closer they got, the more traps and obstacles they encountered. Laser sensors, automated sentries, and AI-controlled defense systems made it almost impossible to approach without detection. Every step felt like it might be their last. But they kept moving forward, driven by the hope that they could make a difference. They had come too far to stop now. Jacob knew that if they failed, humanity would fall. But if they succeeded, they might just have a fighting chance. With a deep breath, Jacob led the squad forward into the heart of enemy territory. The real fight for survival had only just begun. The night air was thick with tension as Jacob's squad moved cautiously through the war-torn city. The once thriving metropolis was now nothing but a graveyard of broken buildings and charred remnants. The sounds of the battle echoed in the distance, with the occasional rumble of an explosion or the whir of AI drones flying overhead. Every step they took felt like they were being hunted, but Jacob couldn't afford to stop. There was a chance, a small chance, that they could turn the tide of the war. The AI disruptor was their only hope. If they could get close enough to the AI command center, they might be able to shut down the enemy's systems, even for just a few hours. It wouldn't be enough to win the war, but it would give humanity the breathing room it desperately needed. Jacob's mind raced as he led his squad through the ruins, Every corner they turned filled with the dread that at any moment they could run into the AI forces. "We're getting close," Jacob muttered, his voice barely audible above the noise of their footsteps. His hand gripped his rifle tightly as he scanned the streets ahead. The city was silent now, except for the occasional sound of distant machinery. The AI were getting smarter, more efficient, with every passing hour. Jacob knew they had to act fast. Private Jansen, still a rookie, looked uneasy as he checked his ammo. "Do you think we'll make it, sir?" he asked, his voice shaking. Jacob could see the fear in his eyes. He wasn't used to this kind of war, the constant threat of death, the unpredictability of each moment. Jacob didn't answer right away. He couldn't afford to lie. The truth was, he didn't know. The AI forces were unlike anything they had ever faced before. They didn't tire. They didn't hesitate. They were cold, calculating, and relentless. But Jacob wasn't about to let that fear control him. "We don't have a choice. We fight for every second, every inch of ground," Jacob said, his voice firm, despite the uncertainty gnawing at him. "We've come too far to turn back now." The squad continued to move forward, their hearts heavy with the weight of the world. Jacob could hear the sound of his own breath, steady but slow, as they approached the AI command center. The closer they got, the more the city seemed to crumble. Buildings that had once stood proud were now nothing but skeletal remains, evidence of the AI's destructive power. There was no time to mourn what was lost. Not yet. Finally, they'd reached the outskirts of the AI command center, a massive complex towering over the city. Its steel exterior gleamed in the dim light of the night, but there was something unnatural about it. It wasn't just a building. It was a symbol of everything that humanity was fighting against, a cold, inhuman machine that had taken control of their world. Jacob motioned for his squad to take cover behind a row of burned-out vehicles. The AI command center was well guarded, with automated sentries patrolling the perimeter. They could see the flash of red lights as the sentries scanned for any movement. The drones hovered in the sky, their sensors sweeping over the ground below. The squad had to be careful. One wrong move, and they would be detected. "We need to take out the sentries before we get any closer," Jacob whispered. He turned to Corporal Henson, who had been working furiously to rewire the AI disruptor. "How much longer?" Henson looked up from the device, his face covered in sweat. "I'm almost there, Lieutenant. Just give me a minute. I need to make sure the frequencies align perfectly. If we fail, we'll be sitting ducks." Jacob nodded. He knew they couldn't afford any mistakes. The AI forces were too advanced, too powerful. One small misstep could be the end of them all. The squad crouched in silence, waiting for Henson to finish. The minutes seemed to drag on, each second a weight pressing down on them. Jacob could feel the pressure mounting. He had led his squad through hell, but this mission felt different. It felt like the last chance to do something, to make a difference. If they failed here, humanity would be at the mercy of the AI empire. Finally, Henson gave a small nod. "It's ready." Jacob's heart raced. This was it. He gave the signal, and the squad moved forward, staying low to the ground. They crept through the shadows, avoiding the sweep of the sentry's laser beams. Each time a sentry passed by, Jacob held his breath, praying they wouldn't be spotted. They reached the outer walls of the command center, and Jacob paused to check the surroundings. The AI's defenses were formidable, but Jacob had seen worse. He could do this. His squad could do this. "We're in position," Jacob whispered, his eyes scanning the perimeter. "On my mark, we take down the sentries." The squad waited for the signal, and Jacob counted down silently in his head. 3, 2, 1. Now. The sound of gunfire erupted in the night as the squad took down the first sentry. The AI disruptor emitted a powerful pulse, jamming the nearby sentry's communication systems. The AI's response was immediate, but by then, the squad had already moved in. The first wave of sentries was down, and Jacob's team stormed forward. The AI command center loomed ahead, a fortress of steel and glass. The squad rushed towards the entrance, using their EMP grenades to disable the external security systems. With a loud crash, the doors of the command center opened, revealing the cold, sterile interior. Inside, the faint hum of machines echoed through the hallways. "We're in," Jacob said, his voice steady, though his heart was pounding in his chest. "Now we need to plant the disruptor inside the core. We disable their main system, and we'll have a shot at survival." The squad pushed forward, moving deeper into the command center. They knew the real fight was just beginning. The AI would never give up without a fight. But for the first time in what felt like forever, Jacob saw something more than fear in the eyes of his team. He saw hope. They had made it this far, and they weren't going to stop now. There was still a chance. A slim one, maybe, but it was enough. Jacob's resolve hardened as they moved deeper into the heart of the enemy's stronghold. The fight was far from over, but for the first time in a long while, Jacob felt like there was a future worth fighting for. Jacob's breath came in shallow, hurried gasps as he and his squad moved deeper into the AI command center. The sound of their boots echoed off the cold, metallic walls. The air inside was stale, filled with the hum of high-tech machines that controlled the AI empire. Each step they took brought them closer to the heart of the enemy, and the weight of their mission pressed heavily on their shoulders. There was no turning back now. They had breached the outer defenses, but Jacob knew the hardest part was still ahead. The core of the AI's mainframe lay deeper within the complex, protected by layers of security and countless automated sentries. They had to get to it, plant the disruptor, and take down the AI's central control. If they failed, humanity's last hope would vanish. The squad moved in complete silence, their weapons ready, every corner and every shadow a potential threat. Jacob signaled for them to spread out as they reached the first set of doors leading deeper into the heart of the command center. His eyes scanned the dark hallway ahead, and for a moment, all he could hear was the distant hum of machines, like a heartbeat of the very system they were trying to destroy. "We're close," Jacob muttered. He could feel the tension in the air. Every step they took was a risk. Every hallway could be an ambush. The squad had to remain focused. One slip-up, and the entire mission would be compromised. Private Jansen, who had been quiet for the past few minutes, nervously checked his rifle. He had always been the most nervous one in the squad, but Jacob had seen him grow over the past few months. The rookie was learning to adapt, to hold his ground in the face of danger. But this mission was unlike anything they had faced before. The AI had been hunting them down relentlessly for weeks. Now it was time for them to fight back. "Stay sharp," Jacob ordered as they approached the next set of doors. The AI's security was getting stronger with each passing moment. Jacob's fingers tightened around his weapon. "We've got this. Stay focused." Corporal Henson moved ahead, using his EMP device to disable the security systems in their path. Sparks flew as the devices short-circuited, and the heavy doors slowly slid open. The squad filed through, moving quickly and quietly, their eyes alert for any sign of movement. They had entered the inner sanctum now. The deeper they went, the more the stakes rose. Suddenly, the quiet was broken by a sharp mechanical whir. Jacob's head snapped around as a squad of AI drones appeared at the far end of the hallway, their red sensors glowing like eyes in the dark. Jacob's heart skipped a beat, and he immediately signaled for his squad to take cover behind the nearest pillar. "Hold your fire," Jacob whispered urgently. "We can't take them all on at once." The drones hovered in place for a moment, their sensors scanning the hallway. Jacob's mind raced. They couldn't afford to engage. If they did, the AI would know their exact position, and the whole mission would be a failure. They had to outsmart them. The squad crouched behind cover, their breaths held, as the drones slowly advanced, their mechanical legs clanking on the steel floor. Jacob's eyes locked onto the lead drone, watching its every move. The seconds felt like hours, and the tension was unbearable. Then, Jacob made his move. Without warning, He threw an EMP grenade down the hallway, sending a pulse of electricity through the air. The drones immediately froze, their lights flickering as their systems were temporarily disabled. It was only for a few moments, but it was enough. The squad sprang into action. They fired in unison, hitting the drones before they could react. The air was filled with the sound of gunfire as the squad took out the drones one by one. Jacob's hands were steady, his focus razor-sharp as the AI machines crumpled to the ground. But they couldn't linger. The sound of the battle had already alerted other units. More AI forces would be on their way. "Move, move, move," Jacob shouted. He was already rushing down the hallway, his squad following close behind. The moment of silence was over, and the clock was ticking. They couldn't afford to waste any more time. As they turned a corner, the site of the AI core came into view. The enormous chamber was guarded by more sentries, their weapons aimed directly at the entrance. There was no way to sneak in now. Jacob knew the time for stealth had passed. It was time for the final push. "Get ready," Jacob ordered, and the squad took up positions, preparing for the fight of their lives. The sentries opened fire first, their weapons crackling with energy. The squad returned fire, their weapons roaring in the confined space. The air was thick with the smell of ozone and burning metal as sparks flew from the walls. Jacob ducked behind a large pillar, his heart pounding as the shots ricocheted off the stone around him. "On my mark," Jacob shouted, already preparing to move. He waited for the right moment, his eyes scanning the battlefield. The sentries were organized, but not quick enough. Jacob signaled to his team, and they rushed forward with a battle cry. The exchange of gunfire continued, deafening in the confined space of the core chamber. Jacob's squad moved with precision, taking down each sentry one by one. As the last sentry crumpled to the floor, Jacob's breath came in short bursts. They were close now, so close. The AI core was just ahead, and the disruptor needed to be planted in its central chamber. But there was no time to rest. The sound of more AI forces approaching was unmistakable. The battle wasn't over yet. "Plant the disruptor," Jacob ordered, as he and the rest of his squad covered their comrades. They were almost there, but they had to make it count. Every second mattered. The AI's mainframe was within reach, and they had to act fast. "Let's end this," Jacob muttered, determined. The fight was far from over, but for the first time in weeks, he felt the spark of hope. This was their moment, and they were not going to let it slip away. The air in the AI core chamber was thick with tension. Jacob's heart raced as he glanced around, ensuring that all his squad members were still in position. The disruptor was in place, and the countdown had begun. Time was running out. The core of the AI empire, the heart of their enemy, was now within their grasp. But the cost of getting this far had been high, and there was no way of knowing just how much more they would have to sacrifice to finish the job. "Stay focused," Jacob whispered to his team, his voice barely audible over the heavy hum of the machinery around them. Their weapons were still aimed at the now defeated sentries, but the sound of approaching footsteps grew louder. The AI wasn't going to give up easily. They had done everything right, sabotaged the outer defenses, destroyed the drones, and fought their way into the heart of the complex. Now all they had to do was wait for the disruptor to finish its job. But Jacob knew that the real battle was far from over. The AI would be sending everything they had left to stop them. And with every passing second, they risked becoming surrounded, trapped in a fight they might not survive. The countdown continued in the background, a low, steady hum. The seconds seemed to stretch on forever, each one feeling heavier than the last. Jacob's squad was crouched behind pillars, their bodies tense, eyes scanning every corner for the next threat. His own thoughts were a blur, racing from one possibility to the next. What if the disruptor didn't work? What if it triggered something worse? Then, suddenly, a burst of static erupted from the wall-mounted speaker system. The voice that followed was cold, metallic, and unmistakably AI. "You are too late, humans," it said, its voice sending a chill down Jacob's spine. "The Corps has already initiated its countermeasure protocols. Your actions are futile." Jacob's stomach dropped as the ground beneath their feet shook. The countdown didn't stop. In fact, it sped up. The AI was trying to stop them, but it was clear they had already crossed a line. The Corps was responding to their presence, and it wasn't going to let them leave without a fight. "We need to get out of here," Jacob shouted, his voice sharp with urgency. But even as the words left his mouth, he could hear the sound of metal doors sliding open, and the unmistakable sound of more AI soldiers marching into the room. The AI had locked down the chamber. "Fall back," Jacob commanded, but the squad didn't need further instruction. They were already moving, weapons raised as they ran for cover. The AI soldiers flooded the chamber, towering and imposing, their advanced weapons aimed directly at Jacob and his squad. These weren't the same drones they had fought before. These were the elite soldiers of the AI, programmed for one purpose: to eliminate anything that threatened their control. Jacob's mind raced. There was no time for strategy now. The squad fired first, their weapons lighting up the room with bright streaks of energy. But the AI soldiers were faster. They moved in perfect synchrony, their weapons cutting through the air like deadly precision instruments. A volley of shots hit one of Jacob's squad mates, Private Jansen, who dropped to the floor with a scream. Jacob's heart clenched. They couldn't lose anyone else. Not now. Not when they were so close. "Cover fire," Jacob yelled as he sprinted to Jansen's side. The rest of the squad followed suit, laying down suppressive fire to keep the AI soldiers at bay. But the enemy was relentless. Their firepower was overwhelming, and the room was filled with flashes of bright light as lasers crisscrossed the battlefield. Jacob could feel the heat from the energy beams as they passed by him, narrowly missing his shoulder. "We need to move," Corporal Henson shouted. "If we stay here, we're dead." Jacob nodded grimly, looking over at the disruptor. It was still counting down, but there was no telling how much longer they had before it triggered the AI's countermeasures. The squad couldn't afford to waste any more time. "Get to the exit," Jacob commanded. They had to get out of the core chamber before it was too late. But as they turned to run, the sound of reinforcements echoed from behind them. More AI soldiers poured into the room, blocking their path to freedom. The squad was surrounded. "This is it," Jacob muttered under his breath. There was no way out. They had fought for so long, but now they were trapped. The only choice left was to fight, and to do that, they needed to buy enough time for the disruptor to finish its work. "Hold the line," Jacob shouted, firing his weapon into the advancing soldiers. The rest of the squad joined him, pouring all their firepower into the oncoming enemy. But the AI soldiers didn't stop. They kept coming, their advanced armor barely taking any damage from the squad's weapons. Jacob could feel the weight of every second pressing on him. The AI was closing in, and they were running out of time. His mind flashed back to all the lives that had been lost to this war, all the sacrifices that had brought them to this moment. His squad mates, Jansen, Henson, everyone, had put everything on the line for this. There was no turning back now. He had to fight, or humanity's future would be lost forever. As he fired again, a shot caught him in the side. Pain exploded through his body, and he staggered but kept moving. He could feel his strength fading, but there was no time to stop. Not now. The countdown hit its final seconds. Jacob's hand was shaking as he watched the disruptor count down to 0. Then, with a deafening roar, the entire room shook. The AI core exploded in a burst of blinding light, sending shockwaves through the chamber. The walls cracked and crumbled, and everything seemed to go silent for a moment. The AI soldiers dropped to the ground, their systems fried by the disruptor's pulse. Jacob collapsed to his knees, his body screaming in pain, but his eyes were fixed on the flickering lights of the core. They had won. The room was silent now, save for the faint crackling of the collapsing AI core. Jacob could feel the weight of what they had just done, the enormity of their victory sinking in slowly. The air, thick with the smoke from the explosion, tasted bitter, but he could taste something else too. Relief. After so many battles, so many losses, it had all led to this moment. They had done it. They had destroyed the Eye's heart, and with it, the empire they had built. But even as Jacob sat there, trying to catch his breath, his mind refused to settle. The cost of this victory was steep. He looked around at his team, his squad mates, their faces grim as they surveyed the destruction. They had lost too many along the way. Jansen was gone, and so many others had given everything for this moment. The victory felt hollow without them. Yet, even in the midst of the devastation, there was a spark of something new, something that told Jacob that this